Hello, my crafty friends. It's Marie from Marie's Vermont Creations, and today I'm bringing you some masculine cards. I am hoping to put out masculine cards each Monday for the month of September, and so today I opted to go with some sympathy card options. I saw recently in one of the craft groups that I participate in a request for some sympathy card options for men, and so I thought that would be what I'd kick off this series with. So I'm using a bunch of distress oxides and many stamp sets that have been retired from Stampin' Up. I will list everything on my blog post as to what supplies that I have used to create these two cards. And I am using some watercolor paper. This is just cheap watercolor paper that you can get at pretty much any big box store. So the first way I'm going to do this is take this paint swoosh stamp, and I am using antique linen first, and I've left in not so much mistakes, but different. Well, this first one was a mistake. The second card that I make, I left in the way that I did it, but it didn't like how it turned out, so I'll show you a different option on how to get the same look. This we'll get there, but the techniques work. It just happened to be when I got to my third ink color here, I didn't get as good of an ink impression. So if I were to do it over again and I want to get really solid stamping, I would set this in my MISTI so that I could stamp it multiple times. I do try to stamp it again here, which I was able to line up, but I still didn't get a good impression. So I flipped it over, started with the dark color to begin with, and then moved on to the other two colors. It ends up not stamping perfectly, but I decide to go with it because I'm going to be stamping over it in black ink, so it really ends in the end, it doesn't really matter. So I flipped it over. That's why paper has two sides, so we can use both of them. And so now I'm just going to do it and see. I still don't get quite as good of an impression as I'd like it to be. So I would do this in my MISTI if I had to do it over so that I can make sure I get good stamping. But once I get these three blocks stamped, and I am cleaning in between the lighter ink so that I don't contaminate my ink pad, I am going to take, they kind of remind me of dandelion fluffs in a way. It's just some greenery from this stamp set, and I'm going to line it up here and use the VersaFine Clear Nocturne ink, and I will put this in my MISTI. I finally cracked it out. I will take the foam pad out because these are red rubber stamps, so you don't need the pad in there. I will line it up, and I'm going to have to ink it up a few times to get a crisp impression using the Nocturne ink. It does stamp nicely, but I wanted it to be a bold image, so I stamped it a couple of times. You could do this with multiple colors. The second card that I make, I use different shades of blue. So they're pretty, you can change up the color combinations that you use, but this is a pretty good way to make a simple masculine card. You could embellish them some. I ended up keeping them pretty plain and simple. And then from another stamp set, I am grabbing a Thinking of You sentiment, and I'm just putting that in the lower right hand corner, and I will ink that up with that same black ink once I make sure that I have it fairly straight. I did have to stamp this multiple times just because the U in the word you didn't want to stamp the way I wanted to, but I cut some of that out. It just seemed to, it must have been the way had it into my MISTI. I should have slid it over a little bit. And so that one I'm going to set aside so that it can dry. I will clean up my stamps and move on to my second card. My original idea was to take this stamp block and ink it up with all of these different colors of ink, which I did, and I think if I'd have stopped at 2 colors, I would have liked it better. But I end up using 3 of them, and they get progressively darker for each time I do it. And then in between, I'm misting it with water. Again, this is watercolor paper, so we can handle it. I really like how the Salty Ocean block comes out. It doesn't come out as a square. It kind of comes out with an organic shape, which I really liked. Again, I could have left it at this, or maybe do 2 blocks with I'm sorry, it's not Salty Ocean. It is tumbled glass that I'm using here. And so in between, I do heat set this with my heat tool, and then I'm moving on to the Salty Ocean. And when I first, mist this with water and put it down, it doesn't seem to want to give me the same movement as it did with the first block. So I think I needed to wet it a little more before I tried to attempt this. So I will take and mist it again and try again. See, it doesn't, it's really, and it's very square the second time around. And so the second time around, it does better at the top, as you can see, but the bottom doesn't really give me the look that I'm going for. And again, very square this time. So I take a paintbrush and fill in the different areas that were missing, which it works. I think if I'd have left it right here with these two blocks, I would have liked it better. But I went ahead and I added, which one is the third color? Chip Sapphire, which it kind of overtook it. I didn't line it up too well, so it was too far at the bottom compared to the top. So I take out my foam block from Simon Hurley, and I'm going to rub these same three inks over this block and use a paintbrush to kind of blend them together in between so that I don't have any harsh separations between the three colors. And then I will mist this with the water so that it beads up, and flip it over and put it on the watercolor paper and let it set for a little bit with giving it some pressure. I am shocked that with the first round, I managed to center this block with a pretty even border around, and it bled a little bit, so it gives it an organic look. It's not quite as square, which I really end up enjoying how this turned out versus using the stamping block. So if you have one of these, you can heat it up and put impressions in it. So you could do that with the ink. If you wanted to take like an embossing folder and add the detail to it, you could do it that way and then put your ink on. But I decided to just use the block with no indentation in it at all. And there I added the water, and then I'm just going to flip it over. And I was able to wet this down a second time and get a second panel off camera. It's a lighter version, but I also really like how that one came out. I did heat set this with my heat tool off screen, just cleaning up my mess. And then from another stamp set, I will take a tree and I will stamp that using the VersaFine ink as well. I do stamp that one again a couple of times because then again, this is also textured watercolor paper. So there is no matte into my Misty because again, this is a red rubber stamp. And so I'll stamp that a couple of times to get a good impression. I like the silhouette look. And then from another stamp set, which is from Simon Says Stamp, it's Sentiment from Sketched Flowers. I will use the sentiment with Sympathy and Love, and I will add that to the upper right hand corner. So I'm just going to use my large Misty. So there's the stamp set that I used. I just used this stamp set in another video for the Color Throwdown Challenge. So I had it out on my desk and I really like these sentiments, so I opted to go with this one. And so I'll add it to my large Misty and stamp it with the same VersaFine Nocturne ink. Then off screen, I adhered both of these panels to white card bases, A2 size card bases. The brown Thinking of You card I added with just liquid glue, and then because I had some warping due to the amount of water that I used on this one that I'm working on right now, I did add foam tape to the back of that to adhere that one down to make sure that it was flat enough. So stay tuned. I am going to be bringing some more masculine projects each Monday, and also I have some other card series coming. So thank you for watching, and as always, I hope that you have a great day.